Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be, and welcome to another Nacelle Partner Office Hours. I am Jacob Tuman, the Partner Account Manager here at Nacelle, and I'm eager to kick things off today with a very exciting session. So in order for us to begin, let's talk about the agenda today. So a couple of things that we're going to cover first and foremost are some updates as related to the partnerships network here at Nacelle. But I'm really excited to have a guest speaker today from one of our agency partnerships, our first and only certified agency partner, SiteSource with Nathan. We'll be talking about component libraries in Nacelle. So very excited about this. But in terms of kicking things off, in terms of updates and shout outs and things like that, as we mentioned, we'd love to have you join our community. We'd love to have you be part of the Nacelle partnership in terms of our Slack instance. So if you're interested in joining, you can be engaged there, learn about all the updates that relate to Nacelle as things change, but also just be a part of a great community to communicate how you are working with the modern commerce stack and how Nacelle is helping you do that. Secondly, the Nacelle partner portal is live. If you are eager to learn more and to have access to a great library of content, not to mention become certified through Nacelle as a platform, right now is a huge opportunity to get access to the portal, to get in early, and to become a Nacelle certified partner, which opens up a lot of doors in terms of that partnership relationship. So very excited to remind you all to consider these things. Please reach out to myself or Unita as part of the partnerships team, but we'd love to have you be on board. So moving into the guest speaker of today, which I am super excited to have join us. Welcome, Nathan Call. How are you today?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So I'm very excited. As I mentioned earlier, SiteSource has been the first certified agency. And so we couldn't be happier to have you and your team sort of kind of join the network and become our first certified partner. So really appreciate you being here. So I think kind of kick things off. So I'd love to learn more about you, your experience, how you know Nacelle and worked with us, but also, of course, about SiteSource and your agency.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, I actually started off working with Nacelle as a merchant. So I was working full time for a merchant, and we were doing some really fun things and wanted to really up our game on our .com website, which was doing a lot of volume, and we just wanted to push that envelope. And I've have a lot of experience doing headless builds and all sorts of other platforms. I've done a couple from scratch with other content management platforms or systems, and always ran into similar problems. And so when we were talking about a possible headless solution for them, we wanted to go see what was out there, and we knew about Nacelle and had really we could see a lot of potential with the platform. So we were really excited to jump in with both feet on that, and it worked out really well. And through that experience, I've always kind of run my agency on the side, and it was a great opportunity to lean into that full time and develop a great service offering around headless e-commerce applications. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. So I think at this point, if you're ready to go, I'd love to just pass over to you the discussion today. So I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and stop sharing.
Okay. I'll get mine up here. Okay. Perfect. Looks like that's coming through okay.
Looks great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about component libraries today and how we might work with them in Nacelle implementations. Component libraries aren't new. There's nothing revolutionary about what I'm going to go over today, and it's pretty high level. So feel free to send in questions if you want to dig in a little deeper. Hopefully, I'll be able to answer those effectively. But I'd like to just talk about some of the basics of component libraries, what they are, why you want to use them, some other specific benefits about component libraries, a little bit about how we've implemented component libraries in our design and development processes, some potential use cases that we've found very useful, that hopefully is insightful. There's always going to be challenges and considerations to take into account when you're working with a particular merchant and implementation. So I'd like to address a couple of those up front and then show you a little bit about how we've gone about doing this for some of our work. I just, a little caveat here. every merchant, every situation is different. And while I think a component library is a great way to tackle a lot of problems, it may not be the right fit for you and what you're doing, and that's totally okay. Recently, I bought a Traeger smoker, and I really have been digging into like doing my own barbecue, and development's kind of like barbecue. Everyone's got their own flavor and way to do it and things that they like. So feel free to find a solution that works best for you, and hopefully you can maybe pick and choose a couple things from today's notes and implement that and have good success with it. So let's go ahead and dig in here a little bit. So at a high level, what is a component library? A component library is at its core a private NPM package is how we like to structure it, that you can reuse anywhere. It's an independent single source of truth for every individual element of your user interface. And the way that we like to tackle that through our architecture, we use a couple of tools to house it and host it. And that operates as a bridge for common gaps that we see with designers and developers all the time. Throughout my career, there's always been challenges, making sure that design and development teams are on the same page and working together efficiently. And through the processes that I'll talk about a little bit later, we've really been able to streamline that and iterate quickly over what we're doing. So it's been a lot of fun. So just to talk through that architecture a little bit more, at its core, like I said, it's just an NPM package. So you can use whatever language or framework you like, whether that's Vue, React, Angular, or something else. And you start building out these components inside of a private NPM package. Then you can pull that NPM package into Storybook. And Storybook is an awesome open source tool that makes all this component library stuff just a breeze. And it's a lot of fun to work with. And we'll dig into that a little bit more later too. But the Storybook instance becomes your single source of truth that anyone in your business, stakeholders, designers alike, can look at and reference for how they want to work with content, styles, and other aspects of your build. Then from there, you can take that NPM package, you can just start installing it anywhere you need it, which is great. So whether that's a Nacelle Shopify storefront, into a Liquid code base for native checkout, or a WordPress blog or something like that, you can pull it anywhere you need it. So why would you want to do it this way? There's a lot of reasons. And again, like I said, you're going to have to pick a flavor that works for you and your team. But some of the reasons we really went this route and have kind of doubled down on it is just to make sure that we are really focused on reusability and scalability as we build. Since it's an NPM package, it kind of forces the developer to, hey, okay, we need to build this component for merchant A, and it has this specific requirements that it needs to facilitate. But if you start taking away the requirements from that specific merchant and start thinking about, okay, if this was an element I needed to use on a different, merchant B website down the road, how do I streamline that component to be able to handle, a variety of use cases? So if you have that separation of concerns in your NPM package from the Nacelle SDK, you can really start with a reusable mindset and save yourself a lot of time down the road. Secondly, it also really facilitates an independent evolution of the user interface in the Nacelle SDK. Since they're completely separate packages, the Nacelle SDK is on its own set of packages. They are independent, and you don't have to worry about, if Nacelle is upgrading APIs to new version or doing something really fun and unique, and you don't have to dig into your Nacelle starter and start separating things out and making sure it continues to work the way that you would expect. So I really like that aspect of it. We always version our component library NPM package, just like we would with any other system. So we only have releases available that we send out when we feel comfortable. And by doing that, we have a lot of control of how we roll out new components and features. And lastly, I find that this method and process really enables rapid joint prototyping with designers. If you're building your components independent of the platform they are installed into, you don't have to worry about connecting data sources or APIs or other endpoints to it, and you can just work with mock data and all the different use cases you could think of and prototype extremely quickly. It's a lot of fun. So to kind of go through that process, this is how we've orchestrated ours. And again, you might want to tailor this to your team and what works best for you. So it always starts with the design. Your designers need to break down the website into each individual element, and this can get really nitty gritty down to the details. We start with typographies usually and set out exactly what typographies we're going to use on the site with fonts, sizes, colors, etc. And buttons, same sort of story there. So it can get really in depth. And then the designer can hand off each individual element to the development team. And we like to do that with a simple, handoff meeting call, whatever works best. And that's a great chance for us to sync and align on the intended functionality and the look and feel, and make sure that we identify any concerns before we start building anything. And that way, you're saving time and on iterations down the road. After that handoff's complete, you can start building away and create that component. The great thing is your components can account for every different variation. So for instance, if your UI has a single button, but maybe comes in 3 or 4 different flavors and colors, so it can work on a light background or a dark background, things like that, you can start building each variation within Storybook and its functionality to demonstrate exactly how it's going to work and look in each of those different use cases. Then once it's up in Storybook, your designers and the rest of the team, any other stakeholders that are involved, can jump in there and review it in real time. And I'll show you how that works, but they can play with it and see it in all its different use cases and give feedback. And then you can go through that iteration over and over again. And again, the beauty of it is you don't have to have it implemented in any other platform framework like the Nacelle starter. You can do this independent of anything else you're working on, which really speeds up the process. Some additional benefits of doing it this way is how you work with your styling for the brand that you're working with. There's a number of ways to do this. I don't want to get too off into the weeds and tell you how you ought to do it, because again, it's going to be specific to your team and your preferences. But we've adopted a really kind of global approach for how we structure our CSS styling. So we leverage SCSS theming capabilities a lot. And instead of sticking a lot of highly scoped styles and components, we pull those back out to global styling so we can reuse those quickly, and I'll dig into that a little bit more. One of the great benefits of working with Storybook is just out-of-the-box documentation per component. It provides you an awesome way in code to just document as you go, so the features and functionalities are understood. And if you have turnover in your team and developer changes, then you can not have to worry so much about having to reverse engineer, figure out what someone was thinking at the time. So it's just a great way to work and have it all there and available to you quickly. Lastly, it really provides total customization, flexibility, but consistency all at the same time. And not just for your Nacelle storefront, but for any web property that you're going to implement this on, which I really like that as well. Consistency is a hard one for a lot of companies to stick with. And if you can do that early on and stick with your taxonomy structure framework, it really helps you down the road. So again, kind of diving into the reusability, some of the e-commerce use cases that we considered when starting down this road was when working with a headless storefront. Most merchants are still using the native Shopify checkout, user account pages, and maybe a handful of others, whether it's for like reward programs or something similar. And a lot of merchants like to customize the look and feel of the checkout pages. I know that's not maybe standard for everybody, since Shopify has a really structured checkout that's very ubiquitous. Everyone kind of knows it, expects it, wants to see it that way. But if you want to throw a footer in there that's consistent with your headless storefront footer, or navigation elements or buttons, whatever that may be, we found it really simple to take this reusable NPM package with our component library, install it into the Liquid checkout files, and reuse those components, and off you go without having to rebuild stuff. So that's been a really great use case. Another one that might be useful is if your merchant is dealing with wholesale. I know Shopify recently has rolled out a Shopify wholesale sales channel, where it's just kind of a plug and play wholesale storefront that they provide, but the customization is almost non-existent. You can upload a logo, change a few colors, but that's about it. And it really forces the merchant to adopt their vision of what a wholesale store should be. So if your merchant needs to have a unique customer experience that's a little bit different, maybe have some cool, fun features that aren't included in that native Shopify channel, and they have a separate wholesale Shopify store instance, then you can just spin one up really quick, plug in your library, and off you go. In one of our specific use cases, we have a merchant that allows custom engraving of their products that the end user can define as they're purchasing the product. And in wholesale, even though it's a bulk order, they have that same ability. So, we can build one single component that allows any product to, be engraved with a custom message, and we can plug that same component into the .com storefront as well as the wholesale, which is a great use case. Another one that we considered was our merchant had multiple subsidiaries selling very similar products under different brands to different audiences. And if you need to build multiple storefronts, why do it? Why build the UI more than once? So again, leveraging the SCSS themes to create an individual theme file that controls the entire user interface. You can go through and spin up another store, modify the theme a bit, and have a very unique custom storefront and look and feel without a whole lot of work. As I mentioned before, you could also plug it on a WordPress blog if they have a separate blog platform outside of Shopify. So a lot of fun there. So maybe some of you are thinking, hey, our first starter that we did with Nacelle had a whole bunch of components in it. What about those? Can we just use those? The answer is yeah, you can if you're on a first-gen starter kit. And this kind of really builds upon Levi's presentation from a few weeks ago when he was talking about the upgraded starter kits that Nacelle is providing. Nacelle is a API data orchestration platform. They're not in the business of building components. And so you'll notice on the new starter kits, there's only a couple components that are intended to showcase exactly how us as developers need to interact with the SDK and APIs. But really, it's unopinionated about what you do on the user interface. And it's up to us to decide what is the best fit for these merchants and making sure that they have a unique storefront and a great experience for the customers, but also allowing the development to be quick and scalable. So you can definitely leverage those for examples, but you're going to want to build off something else. So a couple of potential challenges with working with this structure. Right off the bat, you are adding a fair amount of complexity to a build, but don't let that scare you. There's additional deployment steps that are required if versioned API or versioned releases of your component library that you need to include into your deployment process, things like that. One area that may be challenging to some developers is not everybody's really comfortable with complex Webpack configurations. And if you're handling theming in the way that we like to, you might find yourself in the weeds with some Webpack. So you might have to do some learning on how to manage that. There's not a ton of documentation out there for some of these more complex things, but we'd be happy to help you. If you have any questions, you can always reach out. And like I said, it does work best, in our opinion, with global theming and styles rather than scoped styling per component. Mostly our opinion there is if you're working with reusable components cross merchants and you have very specific scoped styles, it really makes it hard to manage versions. And if you're doing complex theme changes, you're going to have to go back into individual components and modify those if you scope it that way. So just a little bit more work, but again, you can find a balance that works best for you. So with that, I just kind of wanted to jump into our hosted Storybook instance and just show you a component that we've built and how we've structured it, and give you some ideas. Hopefully it helps. So I'll jump over here to our Storybook instance. So again, our personal process is, hey, let's build one out for every merchant we work with. So they have this, it's the single source of truth, work with your designers, everyone has access to it, and it's really simple and fun to spin up. So this is a really simple accordion component, commonly used on like an FAQ type page. And it's completely unbranded, unstyled here, and it's not intended to look pretty for this demonstration. It's just to show you how it works. So let me walk you through how we try to manage some of the controls for this component. I'd also like to mention here, we typically will orchestrate our components to work with the content management platform, whether it be Contentful or Sanity. So we'll structure into the content itself ways to manage a lot of these components properties. So it's another fun way you can do that. So for instance, we have these three accordions here. We've got properties assigned for a handful of items, and if we need to dig in deeper for a higher level of customization for any given merchant, we can do that in the code. But again, it does introduce a few areas of maintenance concerns and when you scale, because you might have to go in and dig into a specific component, make changes. But we control every element of the look and feel of this component through SCSS variables that are tied to the theme. So at any point, if you need to build a page on maybe a co-branded page on a merchant, for instance, one of my merchants is working heavily with Disney and Star Wars. And so, we have co-branded pages that don't look and feel like the rest of the brand. And so we do that with a simple theme change, assign new colors, backgrounds, fonts, etc. And that page can have its own theme, and off we go. But here in the properties, we can assign, border colors just with the drop down. And the Storybook interface allows you to set this all up when you write what's called a story for any given component, which is awesome. So we have theme options all predefined here, which can change easily. And we just grab one and we can change that from a dark color to something like an accent. Maybe we want to change the background color of the accordion itself to something, maybe that same greenish color. Maybe we're having a hard time with the black, so you just keep going. We can just choose all these different properties and and have a lot of fun with it. So we can go to something like primary or white, change it here, open up accordion, got that white background for the body of the accordion. So let's change that something to, maybe we want it to be that same accent color again, change that color to white. And, we can play with it all day long. Alignments, everything's controlled here in the component. We've offered limited controls in some areas for spacing, but you can come here and add some spacing between these items. Again, all defined within your theme file. You can turn off the gap entirely if you don't want it, although obviously that doesn't look great, so we'll turn that back on right now. Anyway, just to show you kind of how you can structure these to work and be really highly configurable quickly. Another great feature about Storybook is this Docs tab. Like I mentioned, as you're building these stories out, you can kind of have documentation out of the box where you can throw in some, quick references, external links, other things like that. Again, have your component here that you can play with in real time, toggle between the code. This is really handy for developers if you need to copy and paste a couple of code snippets. Off you go. You can see exactly how it's expecting data to come into it. You'll notice here, this might look a little funny to you, where we have s-accordion. Why don't we just call that accordion in our component name? One thing that we like to do is namespace our components and styles. This is particularly useful if you're working with other third-party libraries or components. Maybe you have styles or components that are similarly named, whether it be an image, a card, a shopping cart, what have you. So if you namespace your components, it's really easy to manage your styles. You don't have to worry about conflicts in other areas of your application. So just a little pro tip for you. Another great thing about doing it this way is you can show all the different variations of a component, whether it's here's a different colored option for you, and other use cases. So whenever we define a component that has properties, we also like to define correlating slots for every property wherever we can. So that way it's really easy to either send in a prop from a content management platform, or if you're hard coding something in there, you can slot in a whole separate component and nest it right inside of it. Simple example of that would be here. And this is our accordion with props that are controlling this open and close icon here on the right-hand corner. So we have a simple string that says expand more, expand less, and that's tied to an icon that we predefined in our theme. Now, if we just want to pass in some other icon from a third-party library, we can do that with a slot and just pass in the entire HTML component. Now, of course, we're still referencing back to the same one, so I know it's not like the most intuitive example, but you can certainly slot in anything you like. I would say whenever you are orchestrating components in your component library, I would be sure to try to make sure that you're keeping your components as simple as possible. And this is why we leverage props and slots a lot. We try to minimize any component level state management as much as possible. Obviously, your components may need to track states for a variety of different things, but when working in a test environment, static application, statically generated, performance is absolutely critical to e-commerce storefronts working well. And state management, every time you use it, it's going to have, albeit minimal, but it's going to have an impact to performance. So the least amount of state management you can do within a component, the better. But again, you might have a different opinion on that, and that's totally okay. So work with what you feel most comfortable with, and hopefully this has been helpful. So with that, I would just end with my team, as we worked with this component library concept with Nacelle and multiple merchants, multiple applications, multiple installs, we've absolutely loved it. It's been, every developer is just happy to work within the code base because it stays organized and clean, and it's highly scalable and customizable. So anyway, with that, that's it for me, Jacob.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. I really appreciate that. I think that information was extremely valuable. What I find fascinating kind of watching this is that the key here, I think, is the purpose for doing this is just to sort of organize and have your team be the most efficient as possible when rolling out new instances and building PWAs. And so I think that value that's there, but how much for somebody who maybe hasn't gone down this path yet, how much longer does it take to build a component library separate from the storefront logic as compared to just building it all inside a starter?
Yeah, great question. Right out of the gate, you're going to spend a little bit more time on it, and it's hard to say exactly how much more time it's going to take because you're going to have an individual set of components you need to build for that specific merchant. But if you can get in the habit of doing this way, it's going to save you tons of time down the road as you make changes to the component libraries, release versions, things like that. It just makes that workflow really fast and simple. Like I said, one of the biggest wins that we've seen is working with other designers and that process of being able to iterate quickly, because you don't have to spend all that time spinning up a staging environment for your storefront to preview a component inside of a specific theme or template. You can look at that component individually and say, hey, is this going to work for us or not? So while it might take a little bit more time right at the initial onset to plan, prepare, and set up a few configurations, you're going to make up that time very quickly as you go through the build. And hopefully that just rapidly accelerates the timelines at which you can deliver these implementations for all sorts of merchants. And that should reduce friction for them, wanting to adopt the platform, lower cost, faster timelines to implementations. It's all a good win.
And minimizing, I assume, also starting out with technical debt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And really, I got into this because I've seen so much technical debt throughout my career, especially on the first implementation that we wanted to do this on. There was just so much there. No fault of anybody's, but it just happens. And so the more structures you can get up front, you'll reduce your technical debt in the long term for sure.
Fantastic. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, please drop them in the partner Slack, or if you're watching this live on our YouTube channel, please feel free to ask some questions. I think as potential questions come in, another thing I was thinking about is your pro tips, right? So I think one you mentioned was namespacing components and styles. You mentioned keeping things simple, props and slots. Would there be anything else for somebody maybe just starting to go down this path that you might have learned that you could add in terms of additional tips or maybe watch out for?
Yeah, sure. If you're similar to us and you wanted to kind of build your own homegrown library, we had some reasonings for that, which I won't dig into here, but maybe explore some of the other ones that are out there, whether it's Vuetify or any of like the material bootstrap frameworks, something like that. Go out and take a look and see how they've done it, and adopt it to something that works best for you. So it's hard to say, take my word as gospel here, but I know that this process works, but at the end of the day, it's your team and your processes that you're familiar with, and find something that works for you.
Makes a lot of sense. And I'd also can see this very much as a competitive advantage, when I view SiteSource having this type of structure in place, this ability to kind of rapidly build out different components. Granted, each project is unique, but at the same time, you are starting out really strong in terms of the minimization of technical debt, but also then very quickly being able to kind of meet the project requirements. So I think that's a huge advantage too, I assume, right?
Yeah, it's been super helpful for us. Like I said, we can iterate very quickly. Another area that I would love to talk about on probably some other time is just accessibility concerns. That, right now between in the e-commerce world, accessibility is turning into a pretty big headache for a lot of merchants. There's a lot of lawsuits and things going on that front. I've been in a few of those myself, so I have some hands-on experience, unfortunately, with that. And with our homegrown and component library, we're trying to address that up front and working with a blind developer, who's on our staff, and it's been really fun to bring him into the mix and find out how we can, solve problems proactively.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really important point to call out the importance of focusing on ADA compliance, and how if you go down this path too, you can kind of structure your sites to be as compliant as possible to mitigate the risk of being in a lawsuit or something else like that.
Yeah, we still got a ways to go, but it's been fun. So we're doubling down on it for sure. It's
awesome. Just checking here to see if there's any questions came in additionally. Let's see. Check real quick. Nothing at the moment. So I think with that being said, Nate, I really appreciate your time today. I think this information is extremely valuable. So big shout out to Nathan Call and his team, SiteSource. It's site-source.com. They are Nacelle's first agency that is certified through the Nacelle certification. So if you haven't heard that already, I'm very excited to call that out too. But really appreciate it, Nate. Thank you for your time and sharing this information with us.
Yeah, likewise.
Take care, everybody. Until next time.